What's up, everybody? Joe White here, and we got to talk about Uncle Dave. That's right, Uncle Dave. We love to call him Uncle Dave. He covers the wrestling very poorly. He's a very, very despicable man. Anyway, um, Dave Meltzer's the AEW right now. Let me preface some things here. Hollywood Reporter put out today that the top three people that are vying for control of Warner Brothers Discovery. Many years ago, a few years ago, even back when CM Punk was wrestling for AEW, so it's been about 3 or 4 years ago. Um, WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery, was basically they bought this. They merged together. Warner Brothers and Discovery merged together, and David Zaslav took over. They CM Punk had the thing of Zaslav calls me one Bill Phil, blah 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 blah. So David Zaslav, his whole thing when he bought that company was to get it to a point where it was way more valuable to him, and then he's going to sell it. And that's what's going to happen. They are going to split into two different divisions. Um, I believe there's going to be the movie side of things, and then the TV/streaming side of things. So who knows there? Um, but they are looking to sell now. And this is from the Hollywood Reporter. Paramount has been anxious to make an offer. They've made offers and they've been declined. But this is from the Hollywood Reporter. It says Paramount, Comcast, and Netflix make official bids for Warner Brothers Discovery as high-stake fight for the company begins. The first-round bids were non-binding, with things likely to evolve over the coming weeks. It was not immediately clear if Saudi Arabia or any other Middle Eastern funds were involved in any bid. That's been another thing, is that Saudi Arabia is trying to buy these guys. I don't want Turkey al-Sheikh owning Batman. Sorry, you don't want that either, folks. Trust me, you don't want that. And this says the Warner Brothers Bake Off has officially begun. Paramount, Comcast, and Netflix each submitted bids for some or all of Warner Brothers Discovery on Thursday. A source familiar with the matter confirms officially kickstarting a process that is likely to see the company sold to yet another new buyer, either whole or in part. Paramount, led by CEO David Ellison, is the only bidder, at the moment at least, that wants to acquire the entire WBD portfolio, which includes the well-regarded film and TV studios, HBO, and HBO Max, as well as cable channels TNT, TBS, CNN, HGTV, and the Food Network. WBD had been pursuing a split of the company, with studios and streaming to become one company, and the linear networks forming another company. So they're going to split off HBO Max. I'm assuming HBO, because HBO's could be considered a studio since it is pay per, for subscriptions. It's not over the air, so to speak. And then the DC studios and all that. They want to spin that off from the actual TV networks, the Food Network, the CNN, HGTV, TNT, TBS. And then they want to do another company with, just the cable networks. Or the cable networks and then the studios. Comcast, which owns NBC Universal, is in the process of spinning out its cable channels into Versnet. So Comcast owns, obviously they own NBC, they own MSNBC, I believe. All that MSNBC is getting ready to go through a name change because it has to go into this Versnet. As far as other cable channels that they own, I believe Comcast owns a few more. I'm not sure. And Netflix, it says, are interested in the studios and streaming business. And if WBD's board went with them, would either need to spin the linear channels onto its own company or find another buyer. So Netflix is not looking to get into the TV game at all. They've proven that. That's why they don't do a over-the-top type network. Um, and Comcast is not interested in that either, because if they acquire that, then they have their own cable networks. They own USA Network. They own a couple of other networks. Comedy Central, I believe, Comedy Central is part of Viacom still, which is under Paramount's umbrella, I guess. But they're not looking to add more TV networks because they don't want the headache. Netflix doesn't want the headache either. So if they buy the streaming, which is HBO Max, which we'll get into here in a few minutes, then they could technically put HBO Max. You can see Game of Thrones on Peacock, because or you could see whatever's the WWE network on HBO Max. Either way, I think AEW is screwed, as we'll get into here in a little bit. One way or another, this says a deal for WBD will transform the entertainment industry, all but certainly consolidating the film, TV, streaming businesses at the moment when the industry is already being ravaged by disruption. One unanswered question is whether Saudi Arabia or any other Middle Eastern fund is providing financing for backstops to any of the bids. Both Paramount and Comcast have been connected to potential Middle East partners as they have pursued the deal. It is also not immediately clear if any other entities submitted bids. The bids, which were non-binding, were due at noon Thursday, and WBD board will then have to decide how to proceed, with future rounds of bidding likely. In the case of Comcast and Netflix bids, the company will need to figure out how to value the remaining linear business and the regulatory questions that are likely to arise with the Trump administration raising the specter of a challenge. And that's pretty much all that they have to say. So here's Dave Meltzer. He's going to talk a little bit about WBD, the split, and kind of what it means for AEW.
All right, you got a lot of notes on WBD.
Well, it's not so much notes, but it's like kind of like what's going on. I mean, it was interesting because I watched the interview with Tony Khan the other day, and the thing that I really didn't, I mean, that subject didn't come up, and maybe it will today, but the future, because not just the sale, but the aspect of the streaming when it comes to AEW is really, there's a lot of major questions right now, because the streaming is obviously, I mean, it's one of those silly things, that it's because we don't have the real numbers, every single week, although we have a pretty decent idea of how it does. There's always all these debates that are kind of like a waste of time. I don't know why people don't say, well, golly, if they're doing no numbers, then WWE must be doing no numbers, and the NBA must be doing no numbers, and the NHL must be doing no numbers, and it must be like a complete waste of money, like that, because the only numbers you're going to get are the super blockbuster shows, or, I mean, you can get Netflix numbers, which is a story we'll get to later. And, if it's top 10, on Netflix. And aside from that, you're going to get NFL and sports. You're going to get NFL numbers. There's no UFC numbers on streaming that are ever released. And look at how much, Paramount just paid $1.1 billion per year for 7 years for UFC rights, which is 100% streaming. And obviously, they must believe that there's a giant streaming audience if they paid that much money for it. But by the arguments of these people, well, we don't have any week by week numbers, so how do we know? It's like, like, hey, look, WBD, a large part of that $185 million a year deal was the idea that it would do strong numbers on streaming, and a lot of their research showed that it would, based on the fact that AEW fans spent more money on subscriptions to streaming services than fans of any other sport. Now, Tony mentioned that on the interview. I want to make a point that was from a WBD survey. It was not an AEW survey, and it was also well over a year ago. And obviously, in the last year, many things have changed. It could be bigger. It could be smaller. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the most today. It was at the time they were doing the negotiations, and that was a big part of it, was the HBO Max thing, and the fact that HBO Max did in fact start a pay-per-view division specifically for AEW. They didn't have one before. So the belief obviously is that they can't be inconsequential, because if they were inconsequential, they would have never opened up this pay-per-view division, because they would go, this thing's a flop. It doesn't work.
So Dave just contradicts himself so much here, because, we don't have weekly numbers for HBO Max. But Dave, I thought you had this guy. I thought you trusted this random dude who all of a sudden popped up about 6 months ago, or whenever they first started this, who said, they're drawing over 500,000 people, I think it was, on HBO Max every week. So Dynamite's topping 1 million views each week. And weren't you the one that came out and said this guy's numbers were credible? Now all of a sudden, no, we don't have numbers. I don't have numbers. We don't have numbers. And let me preface this by saying that TNT did not start a pay-per-view division. They're doing pay-per-view for AEW stuff. And even still, AEW is doing it on Amazon Prime and stuff like that too. And I think that the Amazon Prime thing is to butter up Amazon for the future, because Tony Khan knows that this deal is going to screw him over. Especially if Paramount gets their hands on everything. Because they're in bed with TKO. Paramount's in bed with TKO as far as UFC. Comcast is in bed with TKO as far as WWE goes on USA and Peacock. So AEW is not going there. And Netflix is in partnership with them for Raw. And globally around the world for their pay-per-views. My point is, AEW screwed here, man, in my opinion. AEW is totally screwed. No matter, here's Dave talking more and more about the TNT deal and about how Tony Khan apparently doesn't know where his contract falls under. Let's take a listen to this.
The key is if these two, if WBD or their schedule split next year, into the two completely different companies. Now, I talked to Tony Khan about this before many times, and his belief is that the contract they signed is with HBO Max. So therefore, they will stay on HBO Max at least through the end of 2027, no matter what. However, there's also the talk, and this has been talked for a long time, of a TNT Sports app. And if, the AEW is one of the strongest properties on the sports page of HBO Max. If they are not considered sports they're not under the auspices of TNT Sports. So, but TNT Sports, that page, they are one of the stronger things on that. So if that split is to happen and there becomes a TNT Sports app, that's going to have to grow from zero to, whatever. It's not going to be in 55 million homes at all. That's not going to happen. So if the thing goes wrong, they would be in, far less homes, and that would, they'd be in a pretty big decline in overall viewers if that were to happen. And if anything, based on the sale when they split, if in the split, because part of the split is the idea that these TNT Sports properties are owned, the contracts are owned by TNT and TBS, and that would be, the Discovery side and not the movie and streaming side. So the rest of those programs for sure would be off Max when the split happens, unless somebody buys it and just decides to keep it. But, even before the idea of the split, they were talking about, a change, either to make the sports a premium service with another price charge, which would, cut down casual viewership of it, if nothing else. But there's there's so many ways that this thing can go, but it's whatever, they're also game changers in a lot of ways as far as exposure levels. You go from, this year they went, from 64 million homes to 99, and they're still probably right around 99, but more of them, almost as many on streaming. because of HBO Max. If they're on a smaller streaming service, that number goes down. So when it comes to the future of AEW, I mean, it's just a giant story on how this all comes down. And it is the other aspect, obviously, is the TV ratings as far as I mean, Dynamite, even now, with the big decline, in the way that they're tracking everything, it's like so there's obviously the different shows. SmackDown is still, they're going to 3 hours because there's nothing else on USA that they can put in the third hour that'll come anywhere remotely close. Although the Strowman show actually is doing pretty well, but because the deal there, it's still, for the station, there's nothing stronger, even close, on USA. So they're fine, until the end of the contract, and then they have to evaluate what these numbers mean and how much they're paying. And there will be an evaluation because they're based on the amount of numbers that they're paying, and they're not on a streaming service. So it is, that number is the real number, the final, the total number. And is it worth what they're paying for it? It certainly was before. You cut that number down to the percentage, that it is, especially the under 35, which is one of the key.
All right, so I had to cut him off there because you notice how, this man, he's like Trump. He starts talking about one thing and then, squirrel, he immediately just goes into something else. You notice how he's talking about AEW and then all of a sudden, squirrel, he just starts talking about WWE's ratings and how their contract is going to be about. Dude, can you not stick to one topic? That's why I had to cut him off. And here's the thing about TNT. Why would they create a TNT Sports app when their sports presence in the marketplace has decreased significantly since they lost the NBA? They've been knowing they were going to lose the NBA for at least 6 months prior to it happening. The inside the NBA crew, Ernie Johnson, Shaq, Kenny Smith, and Chuck, Charles Barkley, they've been talking about, how they dreaded going to ESPN for at least about maybe 6 months to a year now. And, why would you sit there? All you got is the NHL, which is the fourth smallest sport in the country. You got football's number one, basketball, or, maybe number two, maybe tied for number two with baseball. And then you got the NHL is three. Okay? So, or, 3 or 4. Depending, the NHL's fourth. I love hockey. Don't get me wrong, but it's it's one of the least popular sports in America. That and soccer. NASCAR does better ratings some weeks than the NHL does. The NHRA, the National Hot Rod Association, drag racing, beat NASCAR a few weeks back. So why would TNT go through all the trouble of, A, they know that Zaslav knows that they're looking to sell or spin it off. This has been done at least 6 months to a year, has been said that they're planning on doing this. Why would you go and create a TNT Sports app to compete with ESPN, which can't be done? ESPN's king. ESPN's always going to be king. You don't dare try to compete with them. But why would you go and create an entire TNT Sports app when the only sports you have are the NHL, okay? And even then, it's a handful of games. It's not everything. It's not every game. You have NASCAR, which you maybe have, between True TV and TNT. True TV gets more races than TNT does, guys. Okay? And between True TV and TNT, you maybe have 10 races out of the 36 race season. Maybe. Okay? So you don't you don't have a real strong footprint with the NHL. You don't have a real strong footprint as far as NASCAR. Baseball has been limited for years since you sold off the Atlanta Braves, for decades now. Okay? So you maybe air 1 to 2 baseball games a week. I think maybe they get the ALCS or the NLCS or some divisional series. That's it. One series during the playoffs. You know, the main home of the Braves used to be TBS. Now it's like uh, Fox Sports South or Bally Sports South, whatever. Fox Sports sold their shit to Bally's years ago. I don't know what it's called now. But anyway, so you have hockey, a little bit of basketball. They're getting your baseball, NASCAR, and TNT did manage to hang on to about maybe 5 or 10 basketball games a year. So you're not even covering any sport full time. Half the time with NASCAR, you got to duck and dodge to find, is it on TNT this week? Is it on TBS? Is it on True TV? Who knows? They're not creating a sports app when they barely have any sports at all. Okay? That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen, I don't think. I mean, now it's definitely not happening, but still. So for Dave to sit there and go, oh, they created the pay-per-view division for them, and they did. They're planning on AEW as the number one sport on the sports side of HBO. That's just it. In order to get to HBO Max, when you load up HBO Max, nothing about sports is on their homepage. You have to go navigate to the sports section to find anything. Okay? Much like with Peacock. Maybe occasionally on pay-per-view days, they'll throw it up on the main page. But half the time with the NXT shows, the NXT PLEs, you have to go into the WWE section, which is freaking buried under everything else, to find it. So this whole talk of, TNT, they're the number one rated show on TNT. That's another thing we're going to get to here. TNT does not like these guys a whole hell of a lot as much as people think. They gave them a big fat contract because they knew that if they didn't, then they were going to go somewhere else, get a big fat contract. Plus, not everything, the landscape as far as ratings go, has changed a hell of a lot. Nielsen monitors ratings a lot differently. Pro wrestling has tanked under this new rating system. But let's hear a little bit more about what Uncle Dave has to say about all this.
0.03, it's like that's not a great number by any means. I mean, like the Cena show Wipeout is doing 0.07, and granted, if it was on Saturday, it wouldn't be doing close to that. So that and Collision was part of the strategy. So the Collision number is it's significant because they probably could put other shows in to beat it. And the reality is that AEW on Wednesday, always, with the exception of, maybe 2 times before this new system, always beat Big Bang Theory. Right now, Big Bang Theory rerun numbers would beat AEW. Now, they wouldn't beat last week's AEW but they'd come close. They wouldn't beat it, though. But a lot of the weeks of late, when they're doing, below an 0.10, which they've done several times of late, they could put Big Bang Theory in that slot and, do a better number.
So he's talking about the Collision numbers there and how Collision is tanked in the ratings. And it has. It has. Thank you, CM Punk. That's all I got to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. CM Punk or no CM Punk, if CM Punk were still there, this would still be bad. His boy One Bill Phil, or his boy Zaslav, who calls him One Bill Phil, would be selling the shit right out from underneath of him. But the fact that Big Bang Theory and new rating system or no new rating system, the fact that Big Bang Theory is beating you, reruns of a show that ended at least 5 years ago. When did Big Bang Theory end? Let me look that up real quick here. Give me 1 second. Let me see here. Big Bang Theory. If I have enough signal to bring it up. Final episode. It ran till 2019. So let's see, May of 2019. So 20, 21, 22, 6 years ago. 6 years. A show that ended 6 years ago is beating you in the ratings. First run programming in the ratings. And this whole thing of sports, is it a sport? Is it not a sport? The fact that Tony Khan does not know where his contract falls under is baffling to me. Oh, he believes it falls under HBO Max. He believes it falls under. And yes, Dave, you talked to Tony Khan. We've established that. We've established that you call Tony Khan all the time. And if you notice in these clips, the ding, 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 his phone going off constantly in the background. Someone's phone going off in the background. How can, I'm sorry, if you're talking to Tony Khan and you're any kind of fair journalist, the first question I would ask him when he says, I believe it falls under HBO Max, is how the frick do you not know? How are you not picking up the phone after hearing this news that, 3 of the networks that TKO is on are vying to take control of your network that you're on? I would be frantically calling up these people going, what the hell are we doing here? What happens to me? Where does my contract fall under? Can you tell me definitively? But no, Tony Khan's a bad businessman. Tony Khan just flies by the seat of his pants. Tony Khan has to hit his sugar bowl before he does anything. He doesn't know where his contract falls under. He doesn't know where it falls under the streaming side or the network side. Get this, I don't think it matters. They're gonna pay him whatever they're gonna pay him, and I think they're gonna either one of two things are gonna happen. Either they're gonna pay him off and kick the shit off the air and kick the shit off the streaming, and AEW is gonna have to go find a new network, go land on whatever network doesn't. There's no one left. There's no one left if WBD gets sold to any of these networks. There's no one left. He can't go do business with anybody else but Turner. I think the big rumor was Paramount or WGN. Well, guess what? Paramount's not going to happen because Paramount now is doing business with TKO for UFC, and they're not going to let AEW on Paramount because it's a conflict of interest. The same thing with Netflix. The same thing with Comcast. WWE, people are sitting there going, you got to have a subscription service to this, and this to watch WWE. Am I a fan of that? No, but WWE, from a politics standpoint, from a political standpoint, they played this beautifully. They boxed in AEW to the point where they don't have any other network to go to. Well, what are they going to go to? Pop TV? Access? They're going to go to Access? When TNA announces their big deal in January, AEW is going to go to Access TV? I don't think that's going to happen. It's conflict of interest. WGN is the only one, and I don't know, Tribune is going to want that shit. Tribune is not going to pay him near the money. I'm telling you guys, this could very well be the death of AEW. It all hinges on how this deal goes down. Let's listen to a little bit more from Uncle Dave.
It's the one where you go like, God, for the money that they're paying and everything like that, it's not delivering. It's delivering lower than the NHL. They used to, the big thing, they beat the NHL, they beat baseball. If baseball was on Saturday on that station, yeah, it'd probably do about the same as Collision, really, Major League Baseball, I think. But, but baseball's still higher prestige. So it's just, there's just a lot of things about that future landscape when it comes to television and streaming and everything. When it comes to AEW, there's a lot of questions when you really sit down and think about it.
There's a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions. Like, what you gonna do, dude? Why aren't you? I mean, if I'm Tony Khan, I'm taking up meetings right now with Zaslav and everybody else I can think of. Going, what happens to me? I don't care what happens to your library. I don't care what happens to your services. What happens? And I'm sure Zaslav is sitting there going, hey, I got the Game of Thrones people, the House of Dragon people. They draw 10 times the ratings you do. I'm going to talk to them first. I got to talk with, Chuck Lorre Productions. May Chuck Lorre rest in peace. I got to talk to all these guys about. Oh, wait, that's the wrong Chuck Lorre. Anyway, I got to talk. There are two Chuck Lorres, by the way. One who produced The Big Bang Theory and created The Big Bang Theory, and the other one who used to host game shows. He hosted Love Connection. Anyway, I think he did Scrabble as well. But you have to think that there's a lot more powerful people and a lot more important people that WBD has to take up a meeting with right now, as opposed to the Snowman. Sitting there wondering what's going to happen to the wrestling. Because even Dave has the ratings prove that, okay, under this new system, I think they got a little bit of a buyer's remorse. And when the contract negotiations, if the AEW is forced to stay on the air, if they have to, because that's what's going to happen. If these contract negotiations go like I think they're going to go, and the buyouts happen like I think they're going to happen, I think Paramount may very well get it. They've been trying to get it for I don't know how long now, for at least a couple months. They've been putting in bids and getting shot down because Paramount wants it all. And if Paramount gets it all, it's all getting assimilated into Paramount Plus. There will be no more HBO Max. DC will fall under the Paramount banner. And, HBO Max is going to go away. It's all going to get folded into Paramount Plus. Now, if that's the case, they may look at AEW and go, "Hey, man, you're in direct competition with TKO. You're in direct competition with maybe the audience may not see it that way, but from a company standpoint, you are in competition with TKO. TKO owns UFC and AEW and bull riding and all this mess. We're not, we're going to pay TKO a lot more money than what we're going to pay you for UFC. So, we're going to have to kick you off." And there's one, like I said, there's one or two things that can happen. Either they could buy them out, or Tony Khan could sue them for breach of contract, and they would be forced to air AEW on those networks, if those networks are even going to exist. Because Paramount has their own network. That's where Yellowstone and everything else goes. Paramount has their own network. Why would they need 3, 4 more? They don't need TBS and TNT. Or they could shut down the Paramount network, keep TBS, TNT. Either way, they could buy, Tony could take them to court and be like, look, they're not doing the contract. They adopted all these contracts when they bought this. I want my money, or I want my show to air. And then when the contract negotiations come up again, they could tell him, hey, shove off. We're not airing your little rinky-dink little half-assed wrestling show no more with your people bleeding and your pizza cutter spots and all this. We have a classier product in TKO. We can put WWE on those networks now. So I think right now this could be the end of AEW, no matter who gets it. And if the Saudis get it, they're so embedded with WWE too. They're not going to want to do business with old Snowman Khan. So AEW is on borrowed time, in my opinion. Dave Meltzer sure does sound kind of, quaking in his boots a bit. What do you guys think? Is this the end of AEW as we know it? Is 2027 going to be the end of them once this new contract is over with? I sure think so, no matter who gets it. Comcast has a good relationship with WWE. Yes, they decided to go to Netflix, but SmackDown is still there on Fridays. You know, Comcast, they got that Peacock deal until the end of this year, I think. And they're in firm negotiation. It's either this year or next year, and they're wanting to renegotiate. They're wanting to keep WWE Network there. They're not going to go to CW. CW has a strong relationship with WWE because of NXT. The only other option I see for AEW is Disney. And even then, I don't think Disney wants pro wrestling. Not that kind, anyway. You can't. Could you see it now? Goofy going, "Gosh, I didn't know they bleed this much in wrestling." Gosh, Mickey, I didn't know you could do that with a fork. Forks are for eating, kids, not for stabbing. Gosh, Mickey, let's turn into blood and guts. Well, golly, boy. Yeah, they own the Muppets now. Kermit the Frog here, and we're here to talk about today. Brought to you by the letter B for blood and G for guts. It's the Muppet Show with special guest John Moxley. Yay! Oh shit. We'll see you down the road. That's fucking funny.